Welcome to our virtual discussion on voting down the ballot for justice and equity with our candidate, State Senator Holly Mitchell, author of Unprecedented Criminal Justice Reforms, chair of the Senate Budget Committee, and candidate for Los Angeles County Supervisor, and George Gascón, former district attorney for San Francisco, former assistant chief to the Los Angeles Police Department, and candidate for Los Angeles District Attorney, along with artist and organizer and senior advisor for Real Justice PAC, Patrisse Cullors. Please join in welcoming the incomparable Patrisse Cullors.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful. I was sitting here dancing in my seat, listening to that music. So pumped for the November elections, not just because of the presidential elections, but because here in Los Angeles, we have two powerful seats that are going to be filled with hopefully the people that we are talking to today. My name is Patrisse Cullors. I'm an artist and organizer, senior advisor for Real Justice PAC. I'm also a native Angelino. I've grown up here my entire life, and I've spent my entire life fighting for a better LA, specifically around criminal justice reform and police reform. I am so grateful to be here moderating this important discussion with the Holly Mitchell for County Supervisor campaign. So I want to talk a little bit before we get into this discussion about the Board of Supervisors and the District Attorney. So many people, I would say, don't realize what local government does and the impact it has on our everyday lives. The County Board of Supervisors here in Los Angeles are in charge of 10 million people. Let me put that in perspective for you. The state of Louisiana is 4.6 million people. That's the state. And we're talking about an entire county. They're in charge of some of the most critical resources in our county. Department of Children's Services, probation, parole. They're in charge of our everyday lives, and many of us don't know who they are. So we're going to be talking to the candidate, Senator Holly Mitchell, to hear how she is going to transform our county when she gets to be the County Board of Supervisor for District 2, and the District Attorney. This is actually a conversation that has been a heated conversation, I would say, in the last 3 years. Before then, nobody knew what a district attorney did, but everybody knew the consequences and felt the consequences of the district attorney. District attorney is one of the most powerful seats around criminal justice reform. And here in Los Angeles, we are dealing with a district attorney that has not listened to the community for so many years. And we're in one of the most important races of our lifetime and my lifetime, where we get to see George Gascón, former DA of San Francisco, run up against Jackie Lacey, who is the DA right now. So let me actually share the bios of who we're speaking with today. Holly Mitchell. She's a South LA native who represents nearly 1 million Los Angeles residents in the 30th Senate District. She also serves as a chair of the Senate Budget Committee. She's the first African-American woman to hold this position. She co-authored the landmark Equity and Justice Package of Criminal Justice Reforms and has passed over 90 laws to address systemic injustices. Holly has been described in the Los Angeles Times as the moral compass of the state legislature. And I know that for a fact by personal experience and my work with her. George Gascón, he's a Cuban immigrant raised in Southeast LA and is running for the LADA to bring reform to his hometown. George was also the first DA in the country to call for an end to cash bail, the first DA in the state to support stricter standards for police use of force, and created the state's first independent investigations bureau to enhance transparency and eliminate the conflict of interest that occurs when police investigate themselves. I am so honored that I was asked to moderate this panel. And I'm actually going to start us off with you, Senator Holly Mitchell. Let's just start with a 101. What does a supervisor do, and what is the role of the Board of Supervisors in moving us forward as a county? And why should Los Angeles folks care about this race?
So before I get into the meat of that, Patrisse, first of all, let me thank you for your vision, your leadership. Let me thank you for your willingness to lead this conversation today. And let me say, I I appreciate the introduction in the bio, but I have to say today on August 6th, my most proud accomplishment is to have been the mother of a young man who turned 20 today. Today is my son's 20th birthday. And to help birth and guide a young brother in these times to 20 years is something to be acknowledged. So let me say happy birthday to Ryan the Lion, who turned 20. Yes. And he was very excited to know that I would be on with you, Patrisse. And you earned me some mama street cred, because at 20 your street cred gets less and less and less by the day. And so knowing that I was on with you earned me some of that. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
I love that.
I think I appreciate you talking about the Board of Supervisors and how critical it is. And I often tell the story because it was my aha moment when I decided to run. My parents met in the late 50s as eligibility workers working for LA County Department of Public Social Services. And as a result of that, most of the adults in my life when I was a very young child were people that either worked for the county or they were on the county. And there was no distinction. Mm-hmm. What was critical about that time, early 60s, my parents worked in that area during the Watts Rebellion, as both of my parents insisted on referring to it, is it was a time much like now when the country acknowledged that we had a problem. The president at the time, Johnson, declared a war on poverty, mm-hmm. and resources began to come into the community. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to see what government could do in the affirmative, yes. to help people who needed help, that the programs moved beyond, poverty maintenance, and they really began to look like and feel like and take the shape of being true poverty alleviation programs. We fell short. The continuity wasn't there to continue to invest in these programs in a meaningful way. So fast forward to now why I'm running for the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors is the ultimate safety net. The vast majority of that $33 billion budget that the board oversees is geared towards programs that frankly help families from keeping the bottom from falling out. Yes. CalWorks, Medi-Cal, CalFresh, food stamps, mm-hmm. emergency housing, the Department of Mental Health, Department of Public Health, and as you said, probation, juvenile justice, the county jails, the Public Health Department, the myriad of of county clinics and hospitals, and then, Park and Rec, which is another integral part to our ability to be healthy and well. And so the Park and Rec and the services and programs they offer free of charge to families who need them. And then it's the arts. Sometimes we forget, LACMA and the Hollywood Bowl and the role county plays in creating equal and fair access to the arts, which is another important part of our ability to thrive and be healthy and whole and well. My commitment to those programs, to making sure that every child in LA County has access to all of the resources they need to thrive, not just survive, yes. but to thrive, is the function of the county. The county plays a critical role in delivering that opportunity. And I believe my skill set working for the legislature prepares me in a meaningful, real way to make that happen for kids growing up in the 2nd Supervisorial District. That's why I'm running and why I really want to win.
Thank you, Senator. And I think what I love about you and George is you both you don't just talk, you actually walk. You see these things through. You have an idea, you listen to the community, and then you move it forward. So thank you for naming that and how powerful this seat is. George, I want to go to you. What does a DA do? And obviously, in this current moment, as we've seen national protests, the conversation about progressive DAs have come up again. What is your role in advancing justice and equity? Yeah. Why has this been called the second most important race in the country, next to the presidency?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Patrisse and Holly, thank you both. You are two incredibly righteous people I respect you both, Patrisse. Of course, you and I go back quite some time, and I appreciate what you do and what you stand for. And by the way, congratulations on your recent recognition by the Brits. And Holly, I can go on about you. We have been partners, worked before in criminal justice reform, and I so look forward to working with you again. But going to what the DA does. The DA is first of all, officially is the chief law enforcement officer in the county, according to the state constitution. And but more importantly, just getting down to the details. So the district attorney is the one that actually determines what charges are going to be brought forward. So when the police makes an arrest, it is up to the district attorney to determine whether that arrest is going to be moved forward with the prosecution, whether the person is going to be diverted. If there is going to be a prosecution, what is the level of prosecution? If you have someone, for instance, that have mental health problems or substance abuse problems, are they going to get help, or are they going to be put in a concrete box? Do they go to county jail? Do they go to prison? Do you do the death penalty or not? Do you prosecute juveniles as or children as adults? The district attorney also is the one that is there to be the sort of the guard keeper for the people when it comes to the system. So to ensure that police are held accountable. I mean, we have about 600 shootings or killings by police in LA County in the last 7 years. We have seen only one prosecution, and we see a DA that has been continuously an apologist for bad police work. The district attorney also plays a tremendous role when it comes to environmental justice. In LA County, unfortunately, it's a place where we know that especially community colleges have been impacted over and over again. We have uncapped oil wells that are often not only impacting our environment, but actually harming the health of many of our residents. We have seen problems with the gas company in the northern part of the county, and we saw the DA basically give them a pass in many ways. So that's part of the role of the district attorney. The district attorney also is someone that is supposed to be looking, public corruption. How do you deal with public corruption? Again, we have seen a lack of activity here. And then the district attorney, especially in LA County, because it's such a large county, it has a tremendous influence statewide. If you look at one minor piece of information here, California has about 720 people on death row. A third of the people that are on death row come from LA County, so it's huge. So the district attorney in LA has the capacity to influence public policy in ways that is, probably not equivalent in many other counties. Not because the district attorney will write the law. Obviously, that's up to the board of supervisors, state legislators, and city councils and mayors. But the weight of the support or the influence of the district attorney when it comes to state legislation or local legislation is tremendous, and it's often that influence that the district attorney plays in with all these other players that can have a tremendous impact to support things like what Senator Mitchell was talking about, encouraging the arts and encouraging public health and all those other things that actually make a county a better place to live, more sustainable. By the way, through incarceration, the district attorney controls a tremendous amount of the public budget, right? I mean, when you look at the level of incarceration in this county, often people say, well, the district attorney's budget, $500 million, but this is a huge county. But it's not the $500 million that we spend on people and lawyers and all that stuff. It's the billions of dollars that we spend in prosecution and prisons and jails that could go to provide people like Senator Mitchell, hopefully Supervisor Mitchell, the opportunity to provide money for public health and education and better roads and all the other things that make a community a better place. So it's a very, very weighty role. And then the reason why it's been called the second most important race is because precisely LA County is so large. There is no peer to LA County. So the LA County District Attorney has this outside influence beyond the county in the criminal justice system at a moment where we're talking about, police accountability, where we're talking about mass incarceration, all the things that this county actually has been leading in a negative way. I tell people often you could take LA County criminal justice system, you could put it in the middle of Texas, Louisiana, or Georgia, and we will be right at home,
Right.
And it's so contrary to what you would think, given that we're in LA. So
That's right. Thank you so much,
Absolutely.
George, for giving that breakdown. And while the district attorney has been more a part of people's knowledge base, it's still largely a seat that people don't know about and don't realize how big of a priority it is for counties. I actually want to go into each of your policy priorities and reforms. I believe you both are going to become our next DA and our next County Board of Supervisor. And so let's talk a little bit about what those first 100 days will look like for you as you hit the ground running, because I know you all will. What are your top policy priorities and reforms? And we'll start with you, Senator Holly Mitchell.
I appreciate that, Patrisse, so much. You know, if you'd asked me this question leading up to the primary, it would have been a slightly different answer, but we all know that we are now living in very different times, thanks to COVID-19. And as Sweet Alice Harris, the founder of Parents of Watts, has been known to say over the years, you know, when the world gets a cold, Watts gets pneumonia. And we've seen that with COVID-19, with this international public health and economic pandemic. The 2nd District in South LA has been disproportionately hit. Younger victims, Black and Brown, disproportionately hit, recognizing that, you know, so many of my family, friends, and neighbors who call the 2nd District home are essential workers. How are we going to keep them truly safe in the workplace? Who rely on public transportation? How are we going to make sure that government institutions are safe such that people feel comfortable relying on them? So navigating the county through COVID-19, both in terms of public health and an economic perspective, has got to be everyone's top priority. Dr. Ferrer and everyone is doing a yeoman's job in terms of really having honest conversations about how we are falling short in terms of testing sites where they need to be, in terms of having adequate contact tracing, making sure people have access to necessary healthcare services. And so the county is going to have to step up for a sustained period of time to help its residents navigate their way through it. That also amplifies other issues that were important prior to COVID-19, which are being exacerbated as a result of COVID-19. Yes. And that is, in a meaningful, clear, honest way, addressing our unhoused, the tens of thousands, and perhaps the tens of thousands more that will lose their already fragile housing as a result of the economic crisis we're now facing. And so making sure that we're leveraging Measure H, making sure that we are drawing down all of the federal and state dollars that we must be entitled to, since LA County has the largest population of unhoused residents in the country. And so fighting for those resources at the federal and state level have got to be top priority. Expanding access to healthcare and mental health services. When my forever First Lady comes on national news today and talks about how what we're all experiencing now has created a sense, it has helped her identify her own emotional response. You know, my immediate combat was, who isn't feeling some kind of way? Who isn't experiencing some level of depression or fear or anxiety as a result of what's going on in our world? And so making sure that county residents through the county mental health department know that they have services and resources and equal access to them. Services that are culturally and linguistically competent is most important, I think, in the delivery of mental health and healthcare services. And, you know, I think lastly, I would say, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Lastly, I would say, you know, the County Board of Supervisors have taken some amazing progressive actions in this last 6 months to a year. Their vote just this week on Reimagine LA and the redirection of critical resources in the budget. You know, I always say the budgets are value statements. And so they have said that they're going to make a value statement. All of us are going to have to vote on it in November. But the Reimagine LA opportunity to make sure that there is a floor level of dollars available to fund all that we know people need and should be entitled to prevent them from having to understand the role of a DA or come into contact with any other, quite frankly, county direct service, the anti-racist agenda. And a number of months ago, they developed kind of a gender lens by which they're going to view all of the work of the county. These are wonderful first steps that I desperately want to be a part of the next level of conversation. How do we operationalize these initial steps they've taken? You know, the County Board of Supervisors is a unique electoral body in that they are both, they legislate and they're the executive branch. And so they have a unique power to develop these policies and execute them in a meaningful way for all 10 million residents of LA County. And so those policy areas, George mentioned the oil fields. You know, the number of brown fields across the second district is troubling. Not only the oil fields, many of which I currently represent in the Senate, but some of the brown fields that are in deep South LA and Watts that are compromising the integrity of the water supply.
Yes.
Those are issues that have got to be a priority for the next supervisor for the second district. And that's what I would certainly begin to take a look at in my first 100 days.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Senator. I want to pass that question over to you, George. What are you imagining? And you've talked about this so much, the reform efforts that you've already done, that you already put in place in San Francisco. What are you imagining the reform efforts to look like here in Los Angeles County?
Yeah, you know, the first 100 days and beyond, quite frankly, there are several things that I'm going to be doing very quickly, and others that obviously will take a little more time, but we will immediately end the use of the death penalty. I don't believe that the death penalty is appropriate, so we will get rid of the death penalty. We will immediately stop prosecuting children as adults. So anybody that has an ongoing death penalty case, or any young child that is currently being prosecuted as an adult, that will be immediately remanded back. You know, in the case of death penalty, will be addressed differently, and all kids will be sent back to juvenile courts. By the way, the current DA just finished doing an amicus brief, which is a support brief of taking a 15-year-old, I believe, to be prosecuted as an adult, which is very concerning. I will immediately stop using cash bail for all misdemeanors, all nonviolent offenses, and will immediately start working with the defense bar and the bench to stop using cash bail, period, all the way across. I think if somebody is dangerous and they should not be released, then we need to look for an alternative. But I think that the default should be release. We believe that the current system of cash bail actually penalizes the poor. It's really a system where actually you're guilty until proven innocent, because you are in jail even though you haven't been found to be guilty of anything. So I really want to get rid of cash bail for the LA County, regardless of what happens at the state level. And that's something, by the way, the district attorney can do. The next thing that I want to do is I want to be really serious about reducing incarceration. So, and this is going to take two ways. Number one, by stop using cash bail, we will reduce our pretrial population, which should provide, by the way, assistance to the Board of Supervisors to begin to redirect money into other areas that I believe that can have a much better impact on our community. We will also stop using gang enhancements, 3-track enhancement, and those things that actually jack up the sentencing of people that go to state prison. We will begin to start looking at mental health completely through a different lens. I know that there's a lot of discussions about the mental health programs here in LA County, but the reality is that while the Office of Diversion and pretrial service and diversion has worked really hard, LA County DA continues to fight and tries to oppose almost all mental health diversion. Mm-hmm. Finally, I think that one of the things that has to be done is the issue of police accountability. And I'm working with civil rights lawyers, and we're actually looking at cases that have been given a pass on the back that at least have levels of concerns that have been raised by the community and others. And where there are cases that are appropriate, I will appoint a special prosecutor to deal with these cases, as well as moving forward until we come up with a better system to completely create an independent body to do the work of investigating and, if appropriate, prosecuting police officers that commit criminal violations while on duty. We're going to work through special prosecutors. I think that the moment is right for us. I think that we can create a victim-centered approach to our criminal justice system. And victim-centered doesn't necessarily mean incarcerating people. It doesn't necessarily mean the death penalty. To the contrary, it means working with those who have been victimized, that often sometimes they themselves get traumatized and they hurt others, to make sure that we reduce the impact of trauma in our community, the impact of poverty in our community, stop criminalizing our poor. And by doing so, we create a safer community for everyone. And we actually become truly victim-centered as opposed to what is going on today in our community.
Thank you so much, the both of you. So inspirational. I think as someone who grew up in this county and witnessed for so long the lack of accountability from our electeds and appointeds, and then seeing how far we've come, especially at the County Board of Supervisors. We got a long way to go with the DA. And so we are in a powerful position right now to change the course of history. And you two know so much about changing the course of history and your own careers. I'm going to ask my last question to the both of you and then hand it over to the audience, who will be able to ask questions of you, and I'll pick a few of them, and then we'll be closing out in the next 20 minutes. But I want to ask about policies or laws that you're most proud of that you've already passed. We have the privilege of having the both of you have already had elected office or in elected office, and you've done such great work for the community. So let's start with you, Senator. What laws do you feel most proud of that you've passed in the state legislature?
You know, when I decided to run for the assembly, I was the CEO of Crystal Stairs, and we were providing childcare to about 25,000, hardworking low-income families a day throughout South LA. And I was sitting in a budget hearing in the assembly in 2008 when the legislature made the dangerous decision to cut $1 billion out of subsidized childcare. And I knew the impact that would have on my community, on our hardworking families, and on kids and their ability to be school ready, be safe, all of that. And so when I decided to run, pulled Team Mitchell together, pulled my staff together. I'm a Virgo, so I tend to make lists and approach things rather strategically. And I said, I wanted to be able to look back on my legislative experience. I work in a term limited environment to really figure out, did we focus on the right thing? Were we able to make a difference? Did the voters get the benefit of having elected me over my opponent? And so we began to really focus on where our energies would lie. And it goes back to kids and creating a California in which all children thrive, and really kind of pulling that apart to figure out what that means. Mm-hmm. And, I believe, and studies show, our foster care system is directly impacted by poverty.
Yes.
I believe our juvenile justice system is directly impacted by poverty. So when we really look at, and then, the California Wellness Foundation did this study that said your life expectancy was determined based on your zip code. And so we have to figure out how we invest consistent and early. Government and the general public at times is more than willing to invest to lock people up for lifetimes and beyond. Right. And so how do we flip that paradigm and invest on the front end? And so making sure that we create opportunities around prevention and early intervention. So I think I'm most proud of the work I've been able to do around ending childhood deep poverty, recognizing the sheer number of California kids, the 5th largest economy in the world, that live in deep poverty. Yeah. And so my bill to reverse a 20-year-old policy that penalized women if they had another baby while they were already on CalWorks, one of the most racist, classist, public policies ever implemented in the country. We were able to reverse it, took 4 years, maximum family grant. My collaborative work with Ricardo Lara on our 12 bill package, Equity and Justice, where we acknowledged that we'd gotten to a place in California where we were criminalizing childhood. The fact that we were allowing children to waive their Miranda rights, that we were trying children as adults. And so I'm very deeply proud of that package of bills, in that we were able to reverse we were able to initiate the conversation, call it what it was, and educate many of my colleagues in the legislature about those racist, classist policies, and that we were able to reverse them and get that done in a couple of years. George knows I carried some of the early bills around sentence enhancements to reverse those. We still have many more to go. So I think all of that legislation that is a direct result of years of public policy making that inflicted excessive harm on my community, to be in a position to reverse that, to be in a position to serve as budget chair and then direct resources and investments back into our community, to recognize that King Hospital that had closed on a previous supervisor's watch, that was re-envisioned, reimagined, and reopened based on the sheer grit and commitment of Supervisor Ridley Thomas, and that this year in the budget we were looking at a potential loss of millions of dollars, state dollars, that could really impact whether or not King could keep its doors open. To be in a position of power and authority as budget chair, to say no, King Hospital is too vital to a region in LA County, particularly now, and stay off that divestment. Those kinds of actions I'm very proud of. So it's the budget focus, it's the policy focus, all with the lens of my own life experience as a third generation Native Angelino, native to the 2nd District, my own life experience as a single working mother who understands in a very deep personal level, what it takes to be able to have a job, afford safe housing for yourself and your family, to be able to afford transportation, have access to healthcare services, all of those things that everybody across the district wants for themselves and their families. And I certainly deeply believe that South LA families are too entitled. And I thought my entire professional career, even beyond my elected life, to make sure they have access to them. I'm proud of that work.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much, Senator. I'm going to take it to you, George. Tell us about your time as DA, and even before, as you took on one of the most racist sheriffs, Sheriff Arpaio. That's how, our early conversations, you'd let me know that history, which I think is so critical and shows the kind of bravery you had in standing up to that sheriff. Let us know what you've been most proud of and what you've introduced in your career.
Thank you, Patrisse. And actually, I'm glad that you raised the Arizona experience, because for those that may not be aware of it, there was a county sheriff, a guy named Joe Arpaio, who began to make a national name for himself for going after brown people under the whole guise of immigration enforcement, to the point where even in some cases we had U.S.-born Latinx that were being deported because they were unable to prove at the moment that they were born in the U.S. And I feel very proud of being the one that actually went to the Justice Department with 2 others early on and provided testimony in Congress that eventually led to the prosecution of Joe Arpaio and him not being in office. But, as I move forward and getting into the DA's time, there's several things that I'm really, really proud of. And one of them I would say is really at the top of the list for me is Prop 47. And for those who are not familiar with Prop 47, Prop 47 was a statewide initiative that the voters passed, and I was one of the co-authors. And basically what it did is it began the process of unwinding the war on drugs in the state and the war on people of color. Prior to Prop 47, if you had crack cocaine, for instance, it was always possession for personal use. We're not talking about, drug trafficking. We're talking about people that are addicted, people that are using the drugs. That was a felony. And our prisons were full of Black and brown people that were going into prison, quite frankly, for this type of offenses. Whereas we had other drugs that were more prevalent in often more affluent communities, white communities, that could be treated both as a misdemeanor and a felony, generally as a misdemeanor. So huge disparate impact on communities of color. And by the way, talking about defunding the system, this was one of the first defunders, if you will, is $500 million a year that were dedicated to state prisons that have been coming back to local communities for service for mental health and substance abuse. Now, clearly not nearly enough, but $500 million that came out of that system. So I'm very, very proud of Prop 47. And by the way, we need to keep our antennas up because Prop 47 will be under attack this November by people that want to unwind criminal justice reform. I'm also very proud of the fact that I worked on the reform of 3 strikes in the state. That was Prop 36, another statewide initiative that I worked with a team of other folks from Stanford Law School, and that it passed. And they basically said, if you're going to go to prison for 25 years to life, that offense that is going to drive you there has to be a serious and violent offense. We can't just be sending people 25 years to life for stealing a loaf of bread from a supermarket, which, by the way, I know it may sound crazy, but we actually have people that were in state prison doing 25 years to life for that. I'm also very proud of the work that we've done about, ensuring that we passed a bill to ensure that we would not bring a person's immigration status into the courtroom, either by the defense or the prosecution. God knows it's never been appropriate, but, under the current situation now, we know that people are actually getting deported even just by going to a courthouse. Bringing automatic record spongement, people that qualify to have their criminal record sponged, that we finally got legislation to pass. Frankly, I wanted to make it retroactive. We were unable to get enough support, but I'm hoping that will be phase 2. But we know that poor people often qualify to have their record sponged, which is a ticket of freedom, because just because you're not in prison doesn't mean that you could be in a paper prison. If you're unable to get housing, employment, and you get all the vestiges of having been in prison before, that continues to keep you in prison in many ways. So being able to have your record sponged automatically, not having to go through 1,000 different hoops in order to do so, is something that I'm very proud of. I can go on, but I think I'm going to stop there because I know that we want to open it up for questions. And, I also want to just say kudos to Senator Mitchell because you have been there in so much of this. I'm really appreciating it.
Thank you so much, George. So we're taking it to the audience. I have a question here. Yes, that's literally the question I was going to pick. So thank you, whoever's in the background picking questions. The question for the both of you, what's your position on taking money from law enforcement unions?
Yeah.
So I...
you go ahead, Holly. You go first.
Okay. Thank you. I proudly signed the pledge to not take money from law enforcement unions in this race. And, I think it's important and it's critical, not just for this time, but when you recognize the nature of the relationship between the Board of Supervisors and the sheriff. He is a duly elected official. However, he looks to the Board of Supervisors for his budget. And so I think particularly now looking at this rather fractured relationship between our current sheriff and the board, and how we are going to collectively navigate that in the best interest of LA County residents as a whole, is really going to be an important factor going forward. And while I, love to claim my sister Shirley Chisholm's 72 presidential campaign motto, unbought and unbossed, I think it's really important in this instance to declare that I'm not taking money from police unions, nor have I ever in my elected life taken money from oil companies, quite frankly, or tobacco, to additional industries that, quite frankly, whose profits outweigh their commitment to the residents of my community.
Right.
And so those are positions I have taken and continue to stand by.
Beautifully said. George.
Yeah, interesting you say that because I think that we need to get to the place where we make police lobbying money toxic, just like we did with fossil fuels and tobacco money. And the reason for it is because the clear conflicts that are involved when it comes to certainly doing the district attorney's work, but I think even in many legislator jobs, especially at a board of supervisor or city council. But not only have I not taken money from police unions, I also work with 3 sitting DAs right now to actually create state law that would prohibit any DA or anyone that is a candidate for district attorney from taking police money. And the reason is because it is an inherent conflict, given the roles of police and prosecutors and how we have to hoist, first of all, police is constantly bringing work to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor has a role of ensuring that that work is pure and that it's constitutional, but also the role of district attorney in holding police accountable, I think, is too important of a role, and I think it gets compromised when you take that money. I believe that it must be taken out of the picture, certainly when it comes to prosecutors. I agree with Holly that probably should be looked upon, taken out of the picture when you're looking at other roles as well. But certainly when it comes to prosecutors, I think is a non-negotiable. So I have not taken money. I took two $500 checks in my first race in 2011 from police unions, and very quickly realized that should not happen. Did not take it in my re-election race in 2014. Have not taken it now. And as I said earlier, working actually towards creating state law that will prohibit this from happening.
Thank you so much. There's a question here about mental health and the impact of criminalizing communities who suffer from mental illness. Both of you talked about it as I was asking you questions around policies. Can you actually talk a little bit more about how you understand reforms that are needed for the community that suffers from severe mental illness, especially in Los Angeles County?
From my perspective, we've got to make sure that Prop 63 dollars are actually being spent. We are looking here at the state legislative level about perhaps some language change to make it a little more flexible. Dr. Siren, the director of LA County Department of Mental Health, and I have been in consistent conversation over the last several years about what supports he needs in terms of identification of additional resources or even policy. Lots of conversations are happening around what we need to do today to provide more appropriate resources, more appropriate settings, be they locked facilities or otherwise, to make sure we are meeting the fundamental needs of our family, friends, and neighbors who need it. The second supervisorial district doesn't nearly have enough resources.
Nope.
And all you have to do is spend an hour in one of our emergency rooms. And, in my humble opinion, jail and an emergency room is the last place you want to be in the middle of a mental health crisis. They're not places that are conducive to providing you the support and the safety and care that you need in the middle of a mental health crisis.
That's right.
So we've got to update the kinds of services, who we make them available to, and the frequency with which they are made available. And it really starts with core infrastructure. I know our county mental health clinics are overwhelmed and will continue to be so post-COVID-19. We know that people are probably presenting. I hear it from the advocates from NAMI every day, who are not going diagnosed or treated right now with this stay-at-home order and schools not being in. And so we need to be ready for an uptick of people who will present, and make sure that we're equipped to provide them services, appropriate services for adolescents, for women who are mothers who aren't willing or can't go to a residential mental health facility because they're worried about their kids. And so we've got to make sure that we've got the kinds of services that are available. We're having a very delicate conversation about the 72-hour hold and what we do, what we're willing to do as a civilized society to address the needs of the mentally ill who are unhoused.
That's right.
And what role government plays to force them into some kind of setting, either housing or treatment services. And these are really delicate, difficult conversations, but I think they have to be grounded in today. And what we are seeing today, and what people's needs are today. And the county is going to have to be in the position, quite frankly, to take the lead as the safety net provider to these important critical services.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, I think that well, first of all, I think that we need to decouple the criminal justice system from mental health.
Yeah.
I think that for way too long we have used the criminal justice system. We've used police, prosecutors, and jails and prisons as the de facto mental health service deliveries in our society, certainly in our county. And as Senator Mitchell indicated earlier, the last place that you want to be if you have a mental health breakdown is either an emergency room or a jail. And to that end, I want to work very collaborative with every county partner, the nonprofits that are there in place, certainly county government, the Board of Supervisor and others to begin to address the needs, not through a concrete box in our jail, but to begin to have people being provided the seamless type of services they need to have away from the criminal justice system. And to that end, we're going to make sure that we're not prosecuting people that are mentally ill when they're engaging in conduct that's clearly driven by the mental health condition. We're going to be very aggressively working with the other partners in the space to make sure that we decouple ourselves as soon as we can. And we need to make sure that as we start, whether the term defunding, reducing the size of our jail population, all that stuff, which is very expensive, by the way, much more expensive than most mental health services, is putting that money back in the hands of the Board of Supervisors so they can help then funnel that money into the places that are going to provide meaningful services. And by the way, again, it goes back to making us safer as a community, reducing all the other problems that we have when we put people in cages where they actually get worse and they become more dangerous to themselves and others.
That's right. Thank you.
If I could just make one comment,
Yes.
and as a piggybacking off of what George said, we have to stop making the criminal justice system a backstop.
That's right.
To other failed systems.
Yeah.
We've made it the backstop to failed public education systems,
Yep.
kids that weren't treated, supported, whatever. To a failed foster care placement. To failed housing policies, to failed poverty alleviation policies, to failed mental health policies. We've made the criminal justice system and the juvenile justice system the backstop to other government and publicly funded systems, and that is completely inappropriate. We have to fix those systems and make sure they are meeting their mandate and meeting the need of the general population, as opposed to looking to the criminal justice system to be the backstop.
Right.
That's exactly.
And to the point that Holly, that you're making, we know that actually the criminal justice system is the most expensive intervention in the system. So this is not even saving money. This is costing us billions of dollars every year. Everything that the criminal justice system touches gets horribly more expensive, and it generally doesn't fix anything.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And I think, I'd be remiss not to talk about how powerful this movement has been in the last several months that gets us to this place where we get to have these kinds of conversations about structural change, about the change that will really allow for Black and brown and poor folks across LA County to thrive. There have been three big responses to this moment at the city and the county and the federal level. First response has been the people's budget that was led by Black Lives Matter Los Angeles and a coalition, really calling for reallocation of dollars. We spend too much money on policing and incarceration. How do we put that more money towards the people, the community who needs it? At the county level, led by Justice LA, a Care First budget, where they really looked at every single part of the carceral system, from the DAs, the sheriffs, to probation and parole, and looked at how do we reduce those budgets so we can put money back into our communities. And lastly, federal legislation that the Movement for Black Lives is calling forth right now, which is called the Breathe Act, that's also looking at how do we reprioritize what we give to folks. And so I just wanted to close with asking the both of you, what do you think about this legislation that's really being led by this movement right now, and where do you stand on these pieces of legislation?
So, I have often said that government can be slow and reactionary, and it takes movements to create the inertia, the public will, to create major policy change. Yeah. It was my decision to become an activist legislator because from my perspective as an activist, government was being slow and reactionary in terms of tough budget times. And so I wholeheartedly support and endorse all three of those budget actions. Again, from my perspective, budgets are value statements.
Absolutely.
You know, that doesn't take a whole, but that's not hard. We pay for what's important to us. In your own individual home budget, you pay for what's most important to you first.
That's right.
That's what you break off first. And so if we truly value family and community and children and want to set up the next generation to be able to create a California that continues to be the innovator we have for decades, then we have to invest on the front end. As George says, it is so illogical to me that it's okay for us to spend all of this money on the back end. And in business terminology, those are sunk costs. Those aren't costs. Those aren't investments that we can glean a benefit from later. Those are sunk costs. And research has shown us we can incarcerate our way out of crime. We can incarcerate our way out of drug dependency. And we shouldn't incarcerate our way out of mental illness or childhood.
That's right.
or racism. And so
Yep.
what is such a breath of fresh air for those three budget orientations. And I'm so excited because, you know, as an activist before I ran for public office, I was the budget nerd, telling everybody, we got to look at the money. And folks were looking at me like, here she goes again. So you have no idea what it's done to my soul that the activist community is following the money.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Following the money and putting forward budget proposals that government that can sometimes be slow and reactionary has to respond to. I'm thrilled and have gleefully endorsed all three.
Thank you, Senator. George, kick it over to you.
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting because for the last 40 years, we have continued to invest more and more money in criminalizing our communities. We build more prisons than we build schools. We build more prisons than we build universities. And as we continue to divest ourselves from education, from mental health services, from public health, from housing, all those other things that actually create safer and better and more sustainable communities, and put that money into our criminal justice system, we have become so dysfunctional, and we are what we are today. So I will say that, first of all, I wholeheartedly support the concept that we need to reinvest, that we have to reimagine the whole thing, and that we have to start taking all that money that we put in the last 40 years, and that money needs to go back to the center, to the places that are going to make a difference: public health, education. And I agree with Senator Mitchell when she says, you know, money, budgets are a value statement, and they tell us where we are. So to that end, I am, you know, wholeheartedly endorsement of the, you know, county, the sort of care first endorsement. I believe is the right thing to do. I'm 100% supportive of the Federal Breath Act. I think is the right thing to do. When it comes to the people's budget, I am supportive of the concept. I'm a little worried about 90%. Simply, I'm going to tell you why I'm worried about this. I'm worried about picking a specific figure because 20 years ago, there was a new mayor in town, a gentleman named Richard Reardon, and he came out and said, you know, I want to make LAPD have 10,000 officers. And there was really no rhyme or reason to the 10,000. It was a political statement. And I know this very well because actually I was the one that was asked to put together the plan to hire 10,000 people. And we questioned over and over again the need for 10,000, the capacity of the organization to hire 10,000, to do it right. And none of that mattered because it became a very political decision, and the number became, you know, just a number. Likewise, I think that what we need to do is really, I don't know what the right number is. What I know is that there are many things that we don't need to have. We may not need to have 10,000 cops. We don't need to have police officers do many of the things that they're doing today. So how do we thoughtfully start moving that money away is something that I will be 100% in support. Again, I'm worried about specific numbers at this point, and I understand that the county actually has a 10% that I'm totally endorsing. It may sound contradicting, but it's not. I just think that we really need to come up and we need to go back to the drawing table about how the system looks like, and go back to what I think Holly is saying. So, and by the way, Holly, I still have faith. this from you all the time. I say, budgets are a statement of values, right? And we need to go back to the statement of values. Say if we're saying that public health is important, if we're saying that mental health is important, if we're saying education is important, then we need to put the money there, right? And we know that money is not infinite, it's finite. So then that's where the value statement comes up. Instead of having prisons, instead of having jails, instead of having prosecutors and police, we're going to reduce all those groups, and we're going to put the money where we think it's going to do us better. And I think that we will all be much better off. And I tell you that one of my missions actually is, hopefully, if I get elected in 2 or 3 years, is be able to provide Holly a lot more money as we decarcerate, so that she can use that money for all the other things that we're talking about.
Thank you so much.
And George, I'll take it from you. I'll take it.
I know, and I want to give it. I want to give it because I think it's the right thing.
Well, we are out of time, and this was such a pleasure. Thank you so much to the audience who showed up today, largely Los Angeles County voters. You know what to do when it comes to election day. Make sure that you are voting down ballots. This is the team right here, George Gascón and Senator Holly Mitchell. Thank you for your time today, meeting with us, talking with us, being so honest and candid. That's what I love about the both of you. So really appreciate this time and really appreciate everybody else. And have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you. Thank
Everybody
you.
stay safe and wear your mask.
That's right. Safety, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah.
Take care. Yeah, that's good.